Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. Before I get on out of here, I had to talk about a story that's very, very important. And albeit indirectly, it involves Caitlin.
The basketball world's golden girl has stopped talking, but the noise surrounding her has become overwhelming. We are no longer just discussing a roster snub. We are witnessing the destruction of one of the greatest marketing opportunities in sports history, and it may even be permanent, according to one of the strongest voices in sports media. The WNBA elite appears reluctant to acknowledge the narrative that Stephen A. Smith has now reinforced. This goes far beyond simply leaving Caitlin Clark on the bench. She has, in many ways, given up on a system that clearly never wanted her in the first place. For months, the media tried to convince us that this was all about basketball standards. They said it was about paying dues, seniority, and team chemistry. However, once you peel away the carefully crafted press releases and PR statements, something far more disturbing comes into view. You uncover a story of resentment, gatekeeping, and the level of petty envy that has turned basketball into a battlefield. If you're enjoying this content, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, more than 83% of viewers still haven't subscribed. It's completely free, only takes a second, and means the world to us. So, have you subscribed yet? Great! Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's get back to the video. Stephen A. Smith didn't just criticize the decision, he exposed what he believes is the deeper problem at its core. He argued that Clark fully understands what's happening and that she is being targeted because of her importance, not because of any lack of talent. According to rumors that are now spreading rapidly, even if the Indiana Fever managed to repair the situation, Clark has already closed that door. Reports claim she has stopped seeking approval from a group that has allegedly tried to undermine her, both physically and mentally, over the past 6 months. Why would one of America's most beloved athletes walk away from the international stage? What did Stephen A. Smith notice that everyone else missed? And is this the moment when women's basketball's elite finally destroyed their own golden goose? The story behind Caitlin Clark's basketball departure is said to reveal a darker side of professional sports that few people want to acknowledge, so fasten your seatbelt. To understand why Stephen A. Smith is making such explosive claims, we have to go back to when the news first broke. It was supposed to be an ordinary roster announcement. These lists come out all the time. A few fans complain about a snub, and the news cycle moves on within a day. This time was different. It was a cultural earthquake. When the leaks began to surface, Caitlin Clark, who has been filling arenas that has flat struggled with attendance for years, was reportedly left off the Indiana Fever roster. Confusion wasn't the only reaction. It quickly turned into outrage. The committee's official explanation was, at best, unconvincing. They talked about experience, commitment, and the need to spend 3 years with the group. On paper, the reasoning sounded logical, but it ignored what was actually happening in the real world. If Michael Jordan is a rookie, you don't leave him at home. If Tiger Woods hasn't paid his dues, you don't leave him in the clubhouse. You put the most talented people on the plane. Here's where the story becomes even darker. Insiders began suggesting this wasn't simply a mistake. It was a message. According to people familiar with the selection process, there were concerns about how veteran players would react to Clark's presence. They worried about the attention she would attract. In other words, they feared that long-established stars, who believed it was still their team, would have their egos bruised by the arrival of a rookie superstar. This wasn't just a basketball decision. It was about managing emotions. The veteran's comfort was placed ahead of the growth of the game, and that is exactly where Stephen A. Smith drew the line. His comments, however, went beyond criticizing the committee. His accusation was far more serious: sabotage. Stephen A. Smith is well known for his sharp opinions, but his reaction to Clark's rejection felt different. It was personal. He essentially called the decision idiotic on national television and broke down the situation in a way that highlighted what he viewed as the committee's failures. His argument was simple and direct. Basketball is a worldwide spectacle. Every 4 years, casual fans tune in to watch sports they might otherwise ignore. For many years, women's basketball struggled to attract fans. Then, all of a sudden, one player began drawing millions of viewers. When you leave that kind of star at home, you also leave behind the casual fan who's setting DVRs just to watch random Tuesday night games in Indiana. According to Stephen A. Smith, this was a marketing catastrophe. He argued that winning titles is not the only goal of the Indiana Fever. No matter who is on the roster, they are already successful. The Indiana Fever could have sent a college squad and probably still won because of their enormous advantage over the rest of the league. Smith insisted that the real objective should have been to grow the game and expand the brand. By leaving Clark out, he claimed the sports gatekeepers proved that protecting their own hierarchy mattered more than the league's long-term success. He suggested the leadership displayed a level of foolishness that is difficult to understand without considering bad intentions. They didn't simply miss an opportunity, They rejected one. Smith also believes Clark will never forget the disrespect. He hinted that our camp is keeping track of everyone who stayed silent and that some bridges may already have been burned. To honestly discuss why Caitlin Clark is not a member of the Indiana Fever, we also have to address the subject of jealousy. The WNBA has tried hard to avoid that narrative, but to many people, it is the only explanation that seems to fit. Go back to the period before Clark even played a professional minute. The warning shots had already begun. Legends of the game, women who stand among basketball's greatest names, made comments that sounded unusually hostile. Diana Taurasi famously said, "Reality is coming for Clark." It sounded less like advice and more like a warning. Then Cheryl Swoops questioned Clark's college statistics and suggested her dominance came only because she took 40 shots per game. Why were these legends feeling so threatened? Why were they trying to diminish a 22-year-old's accomplishments before she had even stepped onto the court? According to the theory Stephen A. Smith has hinted at, the old guard resents the attention Clark receives. They played in nearly empty arenas, flew on commercial flights, and spent years competing for limited pay and even less recognition. Now, an Iowa superstar who had not yet played a professional game was attracting massive crowds, private flights, and multi-million-dollar Nike endorsements. Jealousy may be a natural human emotion, but in professional sports, veterans usually embrace the rookie who brings more money into the game. Other golfers didn't resent Tiger Woods when he transformed golf. They appreciated that he increased their prize money. In the WNBA, however, the reaction has often appeared to be the opposite. Some seem determined to punish Clark simply because she is popular. Given the atmosphere surrounding her, Clark may even be relieved that she didn't make the Indiana Fever roster. The hostility didn't end with media comments. It carried over onto the court. At that point, the story shifted from controversy to genuine concern. Anyone who has watched the games has seen it. Caitlin Clark has taken a different kind of hit. This isn't about tough defense. It's about plays that have little to do with basketball. One example often mentioned is the Alyssa Thomas incident, where Clark was caught off guard by a hip check before the ball was even in play. After reportedly calling Clark a derogatory name, Thomas knocked her to the floor. Many viewed it as a cheap shot, yet the response became just as controversial. Was Thomas immediately suspended by the league? No. Did veteran players rush to defend Clark? No. In fact, several players and media personalities appeared to justify the incident, saying Clark simply needed to get tougher and calling it "welcome to the league." Stephen A. Smith argued that this revealed a major double standard. He suggested that if stars such as LeBron James or Stephen Curry were repeatedly targeted by lesser-known players, the league would quickly step in to protect its biggest attractions. With Clark, however, it often seemed like open season. That brings the discussion back to the Indiana Fever. Why would Caitlin Clark want to spend a month alongside teammates who either participated in the hostility or stood by without speaking up? According to this narrative, trust no longer exists. A healthy team environment cannot grow when players appear to want one another to fail. That leads to the most explosive rumors surrounding the current situation, the so-called soft quit. After the roster announcement, reports suggested Clark could eventually receive another opportunity with the Indiana Fever if an injury created an opening. It was described as a consolation prize, a way of saying, "we still value you," without actually placing her on the roster. However, according to people familiar with the situation, Clark had no interest in serving as a backup option. According to rumors, she firmly stated that she had no interest in waiting in the wings if she was not considered good enough for the main roster. That is what many have called the soft quit. There was no dramatic news conference from Clark. She didn't make a scene. She simply stepped away in silence. Recent comments from Stephen A. Smith have only added to that interpretation. He suggested that Clark had fully realized her value. Right now, she is the WNBA's biggest economic driver. She doesn't need the Indiana Fever to build her brand. The Indiana Fever needed her to build theirs. In many ways, her message seemed to be, "You made your bed, now sleep in it." By stepping away and using the month to relax, many viewed it as a power move. The establishment, according to this narrative, was frustrated because they expected her to beg for another opportunity. They assumed she would gratefully accept whatever was left. Instead, she was on vacation while they played in front of television audiences that were likely only a fraction of what they could have been. Statistics don't lie, so let's look at the numbers. The Clark effect is both real and measurable. Caitlin Clark's games have drawn the largest television audiences the WNBA has seen in nearly 20 years. Compared to games without her, ratings have reportedly increased by 300% to 400%. Arenas are packed whenever Clark plays. Some teams have even moved games to larger NBA venues just to accommodate the demand. She has become the league's walking stimulus package. Stephen A. Smith made that point very clear. Basketball is driven by television revenue. Networks spend millions of dollars for the rights to broadcast these games because they want ratings. By leaving Clark at home, the committee effectively burned money. The response, however, is passive. Clark doesn't have to do anything. She simply has to stay home, and the television ratings will tell the story if those games draw significantly fewer viewers than a typical Indiana Fever regular season matchup. Television itself will become the evidence. Instead of watching those games, millions of potential viewers may simply choose to spend their time elsewhere. That is what makes this decision so financially significant. It isn't just a basketball decision, it's a business decision, and in professional sports, losing money is often the quickest path to consequences. We also have to examine the culture that allowed this situation to develop. More and more fans argue that the WNBA has a mean girls problem. They describe it as a tightly connected clique where earning acceptance requires enduring a difficult initiation. For years, the league has been a close-knit community. Everyone knows each other, many play overseas together during the off-season, and they have shared similar struggles throughout their careers. Clark represents something different. She represents mainstream popularity and the casual fan. Yet, according to critics, many insiders seem to resent casual fans. That attitude is visible across social media. Some longtime WNBA supporters complain that new fans only care about Clark. They post comments such as, "We've been here for years. Support the other players too." While the message itself may have some validity, the tone often comes across as hostile. Instead of welcoming new fans, they end up criticizing them. Stephen A. Smith argued that this mindset is dangerous for any sports league. Rather than questioning whether new fans belong, the league should be welcoming them with open arms. By leaving Clark off the roster, the committee, in his view, reinforced an us versus them mentality. They appeared more interested in protecting an exclusive circle than embracing a wave of new popularity. By nearly every public account, Clark has remained respectful. She praises her opponents, spends hours signing autographs, and consistently takes the high road. Yet the more professionally she conducts herself, the more noticeable the league's so-called mean girl atmosphere appears to become. As a result, many neutral observers have started directing their frustration towards some of the league's veteran players. Stephen A. Smith has also pointed to another important angle, the corporate perspective. Caitlin Clark is a Nike athlete, and Nike is also a major sponsor of the Indiana Fever. Shoe companies often have significant influence because they want their biggest stars promoting their products on television. That raises the question, why didn't Nike step in? Why didn't the company push the committee to make a different decision? According to rumors, even Nike could not overcome the internal politics surrounding the selection process. Some speculation goes even further, suggesting that Nike had its own priorities and continued supporting veteran players rather than disrupting the established order. The broader belief, however, is that the committee stood its ground to prove that corporations do not control roster decisions, even if doing so hurt one of the league's biggest commercial partners. Clark was expected to launch her signature shoe line, and basketball would have been the perfect global stage for that debut. Instead, that opportunity disappeared. To many, this became another example of how dysfunctional the entire process appeared. The nation's biggest basketball star and one of the world's largest sports brands came together, yet the moment was ultimately lost. It was viewed as a remarkable missed opportunity. At the same time, internet discussions introduced another sensitive topic that intensified the debate: race. Caitlin Clark is white, while most WNBA players are black. Some players believe white athletes often receive more media attention and public support than black players with comparable talent. Although that is a legitimate historical discussion, many believe it became intertwined with this particular situation. Angel Reese, whose rivalry with Clark dates back to college, has often been portrayed as representing the anti-Clark narrative. After Alyssa Thomas fouled Clark, online conversations quickly became divided along racial lines. Stephen A. Smith, who has never avoided conversations about race in sports, addressed the issue carefully. While recognizing the broader historical context, he argued that Clark's popularity is also rooted in her style of play. Like Stephen Curry, she routinely shoots from well beyond the three-point line, making her games exciting to watch. Even so, the racial tension surrounding the discussion cannot be ignored. If Clark believes she is being singled out or excluded partly because of those dynamics, the situation becomes even more difficult. Speaking out could invite criticism, while staying silent could leave her vulnerable. Stepping away from basketball for a month may have provided the mental break she needed. Another major figure in the discussion is Cheryl Reeve. In addition to coaching the Minnesota Lynx, she was involved in the Indiana Fever selection process. Before the season even began, Reeve made comments that many interpreted as minimizing the attention Clark was receiving. She also questioned the broadcast schedule that heavily featured the Indiana Fever. Critics have asked how a player could feel fully supported when a coach openly complained about her team's television exposure before the season had even started. Stephen A. Smith described that as a potential conflict of interest. In his view, the person helping make roster decisions had already shown skepticism toward the excitement surrounding Clark. When Reeve was later asked about leaving Clark off the roster, many felt her response was brief, defensive, and dismissive rather than warm or reassuring. Critics viewed that as a leadership failure. Great coaches are expected to manage personalities, balance veteran experience with emerging talent, and bring everyone together. Instead, many believe Reeve chose the easier path by keeping the young star out and satisfying the veterans. According to that viewpoint, it represented a missed opportunity to lead women's basketball into a new era. Finally, there is the issue of being an alternate. In professional sports, it is often considered one of the most difficult roles. You travel, practice, and stay ready, yet you may never actually compete unless another player is injured. Asking someone of Clark's stature, widely regarded as the face of the sport, to accept that position struck many people as disrespectful. Imagine asking LeBron James to serve as an alternate during the beginning of his career. Most believe that would never have happened. Reports suggesting Clark quietly removed herself from consideration as an alternate have therefore been interpreted as a sign that she understands her own value. Rather than accepting a secondary role, she reportedly chose to preserve her dignity by saying, "No thanks." She declined to support a team that, in her view, had not wanted her on the floor. Stephen A. Smith has repeatedly expressed admiration for that mindset. If you enjoyed this discussion, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel,